Good morning. I'm John Hoyt, and I'm here again to share some sound security tactics that you can implement that are fundamental, foundational strategies that make a good, solid security program in any organization. And today I want to talk to you about one of the biggest challenges that everybody faces, and it's user security and social engineering, phishing attacks, etc. And this is a big problem for everybody. Everybody's probably heard of phishing attacks. Everybody knows phishing attacks, at least something about it. But maybe doesn't know what it means and why is it a big problem, how to resolve that problem, how to fix that problem. And the basic definition really is where using email as a delivery method, the adversaries are sending something to hook your employees, hook anybody, hook a family member, hook a user, and hook them by sending them something that entices them to click on a link, open an attachment, basically those two main ways, maybe something else, but usually those are the two things. And what they're trying to do is get you to visit the link, and typically the link leads them to a login page of sorts that looks like maybe your login page, or looks like a generic login page for Google, for Gmail, for Office 365, anything that could be a bank login, could be all kinds of different logins, but they typically try to mimic or even directly copy the login page for a site that they want the user to believe is real. For malware, it's usually something where they've sent an attachment, and it's something to get them to open the attachment. It could be a Word, an Excel document, it could be a PDF, it could be just a straight malware file. And they're playing on, they're using social engineering to hook that user. And usually it's something like, hey, I need you to sign this, or, it plays on some kind of expediency and urgency to get the person to open it. And it works. I mean, they're doing it because it works. And what I've seen is that almost any campaign, not 100%, but a lot of times it'll have, if it gets to the user, if it's not blocked by some email protection, it will have about a 20% success rate. And 20%, if you think about whatever that number of users is, if you had 100 users, that's 20 users. So 20 users that they have stolen the password for, typically is what their goal for your organization. That could be very significant depending on the user and what they have access to, what their rights are. Now, why do they care about stealing your users' passwords, your employees' passwords? Well, some of it is they just steal it and they'll sell that information. Some of it is they will steal it and use those logins to log into your email system to then send more phishing emails out to more users to kind of keep building that list of users that they've compromised. And they used to be just kind of fire and forget, but they've gotten craftier as we've upped defenses. And they'll log into a user's Office 365. They will read the emails, kind of see what's going on with that user. They will add inbox rules to filter out emails that if they're going to use that email account to send out more suspicious messages, they'll write rules and inbox rules that will delete a reply back. So say you sent that bad guy, or your compromised user sends out emails that say, hey, click here. Hey, open this. I need you to look at this now, as a subject. Well, they will enter a inbox rule so that if somebody gets that and says, hey, did you send this? That has the same subject, they'll just delete it. And so the compromised user, employee, doesn't even know that that's happened, for a while. And it's not indefinite, but it's enough time that they've already done enough damage, right? It slows down the inevitable of somebody calling the employee up and saying, or the company, hey, you're sending out bad messages. So that's one thing. Another thing they'll do is use it for, business email compromise, and it's really a money making game, but they would look through and look for specific users to target, and what they would call spear phishing at your organization. People that have anything to do with accounts payable, with processing transactions, and look for who those users might be. And once they've found the right person, they'll potentially compromise the manager's account, and then have that account to send a message to the accounting person to say, hey, I need you to change the accounting number for this company. They just had a change. Or they'll pretend to be that company, but that's a different attack. But they'll say, hey, I need you to change this account number, and I need you to submit this big account, this big payment invoice. It needs to be paid. And and they'll make it sound like it needs to be done right away, right? And so the accounting person gets that message from their boss or their boss's boss that's like, hey, I need this right away. And they're like, okay, yes, the immediacy, the urgency is in play. And companies have gotten taken for hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars using this scheme. And it's not super complicated. It's not some super hacker. It's just email, phishing, social engineering. It's playing on the person, playing against their personality. So, what do you do? How do you prevent this? How do you slow it down? Because it is an arms race. And as we develop new technology that slows this down or blocks these messages, they're attacking many people. They're not attacking just you. Now, sometimes they're attacking just your organization. Most of the time, it's shotgun approach to see what sticks. And there's software out there that is good at blocking a lot of these messages. It's not foolproof, and even the best software that I've seen, stuff still gets through on a regular basis. They don't stop 100%. And if they did stop 100%, they probably would be blocking legitimate email. And that's the balance. Is you don't want to miss an email because your email gateway stopped a legitimate message that could make you money. It could be something that you really need. But on the other hand, you don't want to let something through that could cause you to lose money. So it's a game of that balance, and I do believe having an email protection software or service is a good thing, because it does stop a lot of bad things. Even though it can be a pain to deal with and tune, it usually does make a difference, just to help, be that shield that helps stop a lot of stuff from getting through. But stuff will get through. It's gonna happen. It will happen. And the adversaries, they're just they're testing these things. They'll know what works, they'll know what doesn't work, because it'll work here, and they'll try that same thing other places. It's just evolving all the time. So when it gets through, that's when those other protections we've talked about really come into play, because if it's just 20%, generally a rule, I'm not saying it's a hard fast rule, but what I've seen is pretty close, then you have to assume that some user is going to be compromised. Assume the worst, and that way you're planning for the worst case scenario, that you have protections in place just when that happens. So having good passwords, having multi-factor, having good patch management, having some kind of malware protection, that does make a difference, because if they steal your password and they use it to then try to get into your email system or try to get into another system, if you have strong passwords, they will have that password, but then if something kicks in and they try to use that password at a different place and you have multiple unique passwords, they may not get into everything, right? And then, but hugely important is two-factor. And we've seen this be such a impact in slowing down when people are phished, being a great security control for that, because they steal your password and you know, maybe you don't know it, maybe you do know it, and you don't know who all had their password stolen, but they aren't able to effectively use that password because they get stopped by two-factor. So it is a significant control, and it can slow them down. Now, what they'll do and what they have done is they will implement, once they realize you have two-factor, they can implement phishing that uses that hooks the user to take them to a two-factor page that gets them to type in their code or something like that, if it is a code, that can capture that two-factor authentication, and then they have to go use it as soon as possible because those tokens only last for so long. Now, it's rare that you see that because most people don't have two-factor. It is rare, and those kind of attacks are rare right now because most people don't have two-factor enabled enterprise-wide. So if you implement two-factor, you're going to be way ahead of your competition. You're going to be way ahead of the game. And you know, so it is a big control. So I keep harping on it, but it's major. You know, and then, you know, having somebody that can help you remediate an issue, and usually what you end up doing is finding how many users were compromised and resetting passwords. It's kind of the typical thing that you're like, all right, who was affected? Can we track who all visited the URL that was bad, that had the phishing page? Can we locate them, see if any of them authenticated, if possible, and reset their passwords as soon as possible, right? And that's a kind of an ongoing game because, like I said, people are going to fall for it. They're going to open it. They're going to visit it. They're going to click on the link. They're going to submit credentials. It's going to happen. Assume that it's going to happen and plan strategies in place for when it does happen. You aren't as worried. I mean, you still should be concerned, but like if you had nothing in place, no other mitigating controls, that when they did steal your password, you were really worried about where they could use those credentials. And that really right now, unfortunately, the best plan is to just shore up all your other controls so that when something happens and users get hooked and phished, you have stuff in place to help mitigate the risk and reduce the risk and detect it as soon as possible. You know, having a way to know about it and detect it. Now, the detection part is difficult. You know, you got to have stuff in place to help you know that that's happened. Sometimes it's your users, sometimes it's other your customers may see something going out from your organization that's never good, but sometimes that's what happens. But security awareness training, you know, we're teaching the employees, hey, this is our culture, this is what we're building in, excuse me, to our practices. Be aware, and it does help stop things if you do teach them. Now, it's not going to stop everything, but if you make it an important thing to say, don't click on links unless you're sure what it is, and even then, you could go enter in the URL into a site as opposed to clicking the link. So it's not a spoofed domain or a spoofed link that looks like the actual page, but it's really not. Teach them to check the URL and make sure that it is what it's supposed to be. You know, teaching them to look for, you know, the lock sign, things like that. Teaching them to check for a certificate is even more advanced, but it is something that's a good strategy. Teaching them not to open attachments unless they really are sure of who it's from and what it is. You know, because those two methods is what's happening. Usually it's a URL, but just as difficult to deal with is an attachment. That could be an attachment that has a link in it. I've seen those where it's an attachment, a PDF that just has a URL in it, that then it gets through the email security that takes them to another login page that gets them to log in there. So just like educating them and saying, look, you're going to see bad things. And when it does happen, actually use that as a learning opportunity. Use that opportunity when somebody does have an issue, not to call them out, and you don't even have to name who it is, but say, look, we had this, it happened. We obviously have been targeted by this. Here's what it looked like. Here's what the URL looked like. Just be careful visiting sites. But here's what it looked like. Here's how it tricked our users. Somebody fell for it, or they at least visited it. And this is why you need to be careful and how to avoid it and how to be safe about it. So, it's a challenge. Everybody's dealing with it. The bad guys know that this is an effective technique, and it's something that that they have in their arsenal that they use all the time. So I think some of those, are solid strategies based off of our other strategies that we've already discussed. And shoring up those controls will help you sleep better, knowing that if and when somebody actually gets phished and they get their account compromised, you have other things in place to reduce that risk. So thanks again. I hope this is useful. I hope it helps you or somebody else. If it isn't applicable to you, pass it on to somebody else. And thank you for your time.